Thank you both for the great introduction, although I admit that I had difficulties to follow your speech on Turkish because I didn't have that. But thank you very much. Thank you, Bülent, as well. Yeah, I'm very pleased that we can be here. When I first discussed with Bülent on this program, I was thinking about how we can make this success, yeah, and under which title we should do that. And we came up with the title, How to Manage Digital Transformation Towards Industry 4.0, and this gives you already an indication of how we see this. We see Industry 4.0 as an element, let's say, in a wider digital transformation context. And what I would like to do now is quickly give you an overview on the agenda for the next 2 days. We have here, let's say, on the first half day today, a presentation, a plenary session on digital transformation towards Industry 4.0, and I will give you a bit of context on Industry 4.0, how this is placed in this space, and also some aspects on a holistic view on digital transformation towards Industry 4.0, and some empirical insights from a cross-industries study. We will then have, as a second element this morning, a breakout session with a self-assessment, which is basically reflecting some questions from a wider study we did globally for 103 companies, and where you can actually find out and position yourselves according to industries or companies. We will have groups there. Basically develop an understanding where the key issues you are facing, and then we will see the results from a global set of companies and map this together. And so you have and we will hopefully have a good discussion on where you in Turkey and with your companies, with your industry stand versus a global in a global context. Yeah. I think this is could be potentially very interesting. In the afternoon, we will have exactly a number of those digital transformation stimuli, which is together with these empirical insights, we'll present some case studies, some cases where in areas where digital transformation took place, and towards the end of this day, I will present a framework how to devise a target picture on digital transformation, and also a roadmap towards Industry 4.0, including a case study from an automotive supplier company. And I will discuss what are the key elements of such a transformation journey, how to develop a target picture with its key aspects on products and services, operating model, business model, as well as people and technology capabilities. And also, finally, how to make this transformation happen. We will then have networking reception in the evening, and on day 2 we will then go into a deep dive on the cultural aspects. We consider these very essential in this context before we, in the second half of the second day in the morning, have another breakout session where we bring this all together and work on a specific target picture in groups, yeah, so that you actually try to apply together with us some of the key concepts we want to convey here. And then we will present that again, discuss it in this audience. Yeah, and also have a lot of interaction, I hope so. So with this, I would like to start with my first talk on Industry 4.0. And just as an intro, I mean, you all are probably well aware of what is shown on this slide. Yeah? We have seen a huge transformation, and some big players disappeared already. Kodak is a famous example. They didn't manage actually to to undergo and this transformation from physical photography, a physical bearer element basically for photos, to the digital bearer element. Yeah, so the company disappeared. Yeah, then you have Wikipedia, the encyclopedia, which was basically swiped away. The whole business, the whole industry disappeared. Then you have Amazon, which disrupted book retailing. Yeah, so it started pretty much in the media, communications industry, information businesses, and now the whole movement goes towards more established, traditional asset-heavy industries: electronics, banking, healthcare, life science, yeah, manufacturing. Industry 4.0. And you can feel it everywhere. Also in Germany, by the way. I mean, I discussed that over the last years, even though it's a topic for 15, 20 years. Yeah? Digital is not new. I always sometimes I ask myself the question, what's new under the sun? Because I used to work, for example, at Fraunhofer in Germany, in Berlin, from 1995, and I was in ERP development, manufacturing execution systems, and things like that. So since 25 years, we are discussing digital topics, digitization of processes. Yeah, but still, when you go to some rather remote areas in Germany, let's say in the northwest or so, you find companies with 1,000, 5,000 people or so, $1 billion or euro turnover, and they are not really digitized. They are very, very traditional. Yeah. So there's still a huge work to do. And why should we care? If you look at this, these empirical insights, what do they tell us? They tell us that the lifespan of a company, and this is the big companies, the Standard & Poor's 500 companies, dramatically reduced over the last decades, from 1960 to, we are here, 2015, 2020, yeah. It decreased from average 61 years life of a company, yeah, to now it's about 17 years average life of a company. And I'm talking about those companies don't usually fully disappear, but there's mergers and acquisitions, they are sold off, they're cut into pieces, so they cease to exist as a company. Yeah? So if you are in the leadership teams or with your companies, and if you were living in the 1960s, you could be pretty sure that you would start your working life in one company and you would end it in this company. Today, it's not the case. And if you are a CEO or C-level, yeah, you can't be sure whether in 5 years your company will exist still. This is the message here. And for the large companies, Standard & Poor's 500, from 2000 to 2015, 52% of those companies ceased to exist. More than half. It's almost unbelievable, actually, when I saw these numbers. And that's why we should care. And if we look at the history, where do all these terms, Industry 4.0, come from? Yeah? It started off with what we would call Industry 1.0 in the 18th to 20th century with the Industrial Revolution, the mass production, and there it was all about physical products and processes. Yeah? Then in Industry 2.0 from the 1960s, it was all about industrial IT, those huge closets here with technology yeah, inside. And it was pretty much about automation and IT for production control yeah? In a company, in a plant. And Industry 3.0 started probably around the 1980s with the introduction of the personal computer. I think this was in 1984. And also in the industrial context, the enterprise resource planning, production planning and control concepts, later in the 2000s, manufacturing execution systems. So I always knew, let's say, names for more or less the same thing. And this was pretty much about, there's a typo actually, production planning and control, and also office automation. Yeah, we've seen the Microsoft Office, communication, email, and so on, basically changing the way people work. So what is new under the sun with Industry 4.0 and what is this? Yeah? Actually, it is about the internet and how the internet basically connects with products. Internet and smart connected products, and this leads actually to a technology and an industry convergence. And it also leads to paradigm shifts that I will outline on my next slide. What you can see here is 8 key trends which we perceive, take us from today or yesterday to the future. And the first one, which is key, I mentioned already, it's a trend from physical product and also static product features to a smart connected product and continuous updates. A good example from the automotive industry, and we will see that later in more detail, is a Tesla car, yeah? Which basically is a physical product, a car, but receives through the internet updates of features. Even the performance of the car can be changed, yeah? Just through an update through the internet in seconds. Yeah? We have, obviously, we all know these devices, our smartphones, yeah, continuously updated. And we see that in many other areas for products as well. We see development from pure a consumer consumers of and users of technology to a prosumer world where actually I'm not or no longer only using technology and buying a product, but also contributing to the solution. For example, 3D printing would be a good example. Yeah? 3D printer producers produce the hardware, yeah. I buy it, but I produce myself the parts, yeah, as a part. A third trend is that we come from static locations and to everything mobile. Yeah, we receive information everywhere. We produce where the parts are actually needed, 3D printing again, yeah. Then obviously a trend from pure mass production, every product looks the same, to a very personalized, individualized products we receive and services we receive. That's certainly key. Then a trend from ownership to a product as a service, to share economy. Car sharing, big thing, at least in Germany. I don't know much about Turkey and Istanbul in that respect, yeah. But it's yeah, a very strong movement, basically, that resources are shared. And then, number 6, it's from rather islands and disconnected companies and players in an ecosystem, players to the development of whole ecosystems where a lot of stakeholders, which are not under one legal entity, really jointly work together to produce a product or service. A very recent development is that our centralized IT systems now will undergo in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, certainly a fundamental shift towards more decentralized, distributed systems. And the key technology, we will talk about that later as well, is blockchain technology, which enables basically a development towards a more distributed IT and computing landscape. And lastly, this all leads from to a trend that industry verticals disappear. Yeah? There's an industry and technology convergence that can be perceived. For example, the automotive industry for decades has been very strong, vertical, very focused, but the automotive industry is under threat by internet players. Google wants to build the car. Yeah, Tesla came on the market, no experience virtually in automotive industry, and really gained a huge traction. And Google also bought, for example, we discussed it yesterday, home automation and control, Nest, yeah, very traditional business, yeah, and so you cannot be sure that your vertical experience is sufficient, basically, to tackle the challenges of the future. Yeah. Some examples I discussed. Here we can already mention at the intersection of smart connected products with automotive, the Wi-Fi software upgrades for the cars. The prosumer-consumer example here is also true. I think we have in the audience also a representative from the energy industry. It's obviously also true for energy production. Yeah, it's not anymore about the huge power plants, but also about decentralized energy production. I can have my own solar cells on the roof, and I basically consume energy, but also produce it myself and give it back to the networked system. 3D printing I mentioned, personalization. I will later also show an example about the personalization of running shoes, yeah, of sneakers. Yeah. Product as a service, obviously cloud-based services are big. Car sharing I mentioned. Smart home applications I mentioned already here for ecosystem play. Google Car I mentioned. Decentralized IT is certainly probably heard of Bitcoin, where in the financial services industry, where this plays a huge role. Yeah, so a number of examples where these trends basically can be visible. Yeah. if we look now a little bit deeper into the Industry 4.0 value chain, what you can see here is our key elements of this value chain, starting with hardware. So we are talking about the SIM cards, which are the key in our mobile telephone networks. We are talking about sensors to detect motion, to detect temperature, to detect pressure, and so on. We are talking about actors to do something, to influence a machine, basically. Transponders, and also complete modules of hardware, which would then go into so-called smart objects, cars, machines, turbines, plants. Yeah? They need connectivity through a local area network, through a wide area network, mobile networks, they communicate. And then you have in this value chain network operations. The telecom providers are very important. They are providing all this infrastructure to enable communication of machines, of people, of things. And also the, let's say, more over-the-top players that don't own networks but provide services targeted at specific industry verticals. Then, oh, sorry. Oh, back, yeah. Then we have the service enablers. They provide the platforms, they provide applications and enabling capabilities. Before we have whole system integrators which provide interfaces, hardware, backend integration on the technology side, on-site. Yeah? And then service providers who bundle all this, who provide customer relationship management, who provide billing services. Before it comes to B2B customers, companies trading with companies, and to the end user. And for every company, it is really key to understand where they are in this value chain and where they want to position themselves in the future. Yeah. So it's about, if I come to the more manufacturing-centric companies, it's a question, where do I want to be in on this value chain? Do I want to expand my product to become more a system integrator, a service provider? I mean, many suppliers of hardware we talked to, just recently, I think last week, Carl Michael, we talked to huge, large automotive suppliers, component suppliers, manufacturing, for example, cables. The successor of Tyco, previously the firm was called Tyco, they do cables. Yeah? We were in discussions with them how they can actually become a system integrator, how they can actually manage the digital transformation, because they do cables. Nobody actually sees them. You don't notice that they have actually a significant portion of the value of a car you would buy. Yeah? They are very important. So their key question is how to position themselves here. So a few examples here, a few logos, traditional, well-known companies you would know. In the hardware business, Bosch, you see several times here. Also hardware, they are big sensor producers. Almost all sensors in mobile phones come from Bosch, for example. They do obviously the components, machines, plants, and also are service enablers and move to service provider positions as well. I think there's also a representative from Bosch here. I've seen at Hannover Messe Industry a nice example where they, for example, Bosch Rexroth presented a tool that I wouldn't buy anymore. I would use it basically as a service. They would provide me the tool, and I pay per screw that is actually fastened in a particular context. So it's completely new models that we will see here. Now, what about the value share distribution? What you can see here is that the hardware part accounts for 5 to 10% approximately of the value distribution. The smart object itself between 15 and 35%. So when you are in the hardware business, it shows you that the portion of the value chain is actually shrinking. Maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago it was 80, 90%, and now all the other elements become more important here. And they take more of the value. So it's about extending the own service offering towards service enabling and service provisioning. Basically, this is what is happening here. And the whole Industry 4.0 topic, which was actually, I don't know whether I mentioned it, it was coined by Henning Kagermann and Mr. Walster in 2011 at the Hannover Messe Industrie, and I talked to Henning Kagermann, I think 1.5 years ago, and he said he never could have imagined that the term Industry 4.0 would become so well known throughout the world. They thought, okay, we need for our press conference, we need a good headline, and that's why they came up with Industry 4.0, as a catch phrase, more or less, and then the whole hype around this topic emerged, because people actually found it useful. But what is this all about? It is actually about the vertical integration of data and analytics across a company, across those different departments. It is about the horizontal integration of data and analytics on the factory level across the supply chain, from a supplier network, a partner network, via the planning functions, procurement, production, logistics to the customer network. And it is about the integration of data across the product life cycle. So from design through use to basically recycling. The whole chain, through the whole chain, data is generated and needs to be put to use. And to make all this happen, to make this vision happen, it is a key challenge to select actually the appropriate technologies to make it happen, because we live in a world of technology abundance. There's so many providers of solutions out there that it's virtually impossible to directly decide which solution to take. It is a really vast array of opportunities there, and more or less for any question you can find a technology solution, almost every question. There's almost nothing that's impossible there, but still all those components need to work together to make it happen, and that's the real challenge. So who of you has been in the program last year? It's because you would have probably recognized this picture. It has been shown already, and what you can see here is an illustration of this development from a physical product to a smart connected product, and even more into a platform business where it's about a complete change of a business model, where tractor manufacturer, a farm equipment manufacturer, started in the past with selling hardware, producing hardware. It then gradually became more intelligent by adding analytics, by adding connectivity to the internet, by looking at a complete product system where actually this land machine, this tractor, is integrating a whole fleet, where a fleet of tractors is managed, where these tools like tillers, like planters, like harvesters are all interconnected and talk to each other. And I, as an owner, can basically manage all these this equipment, these assets, to optimize utilization. But this is not the end. The end game is basically that I, as a farmer, for example, don't own this equipment anymore, but Claas or John Deere and the large producers out there, they sell me an outcome. They sell me basically that I can produce such and such amount of fruit, such and such amount of wheat, and so on. So many tons of wheat. I take care of the equipment, I take care of the management, maintenance, and all this. And this has huge implications also on the approach they design their products, for example. It's not about selling a tractor and a farm equipment to somebody out there and then more or less forget about, maybe provide some service, sell expensive components to maintain those products. It's not about this. It's about basically designing the whole machine, but also the ecosystem around that in a way that is very cost efficient. And this is not only true for the this example here in the agricultural machinery business. It is also true, for example, for the construction machinery business. I was very impressed when I see already, I think 2 years ago, from a friend at Caterpillar, how they actually, I wouldn't buy from Caterpillar the truck. They say, okay, you want to move 60,000 tons of stone per year in this area around Frankfurt. No problem. We know the capacity you would need. We provide every machine you would need there, and we maintain it. And we take care of that when you say next week, I want to move 50 tons of stone from this place to 30 kilometers away, we will manage it. And they sell this. They don't sell their truck anymore. It's unbelievable for me, and they can detect basically through a control equipment, they can detect the hydraulic status of those machines. They can go out there, get their maintenance teams out there, and look at 100% or a very high utilization, basically. Good. So, Industry 4.0. I said already, it's about data at the center. You see some key notions around this center. One of it is Industry 4.0 here in the German version. But also we come across the topic smart manufacturing, which indicates that the origin was basically in the plant, in the production, very factory-centric. But as you can see here on the outside, we have concepts which converge, like the industrial internet, industrial process automation. The Americans call it industrial internet of things. Chinese, a huge initiative called Made in China 2025. And this is more or less a movement into a holistic concept that links the Internet of Things, machine-to-machine communication, the Internet of Services, I talked about services earlier, and the Internet of Humans. We all know this with our smartphones. It's about an integration here into a world where anything, anyone talks any time to anywhere. Yeah? So it is coined by Data Industry 4.0, embedded in a wider digital transformation concept. This is certainly one of the key takeaways. But what are the challenges? Challenges for Industry 4.0 are quite a few, and they have been around also for quite a while. When I put up this slide, some of you who are into tech will recognize immediately that the topic real-time data is not new. Yeah? It has been around for, I don't know, 15, 20 years probably. Yeah? And what it requires is top information technology and communications infrastructure. When I, for example, the smartphone, these guys here from Apple, they were not the inventors of the smartphone. I had in 1997, I think, from Nokia, a device called the communicator. And I used it I think in the Middle East, in Dubai, yeah, and tried to, it has an internet connection, yeah, and I tried to get information about a client, yeah, in the hotel. Basically what happened was that I tried to research this client. Nothing showed up on my display, and I had an invoice about $500 US next day. Yeah? So that's not top IT and communications infrastructure. This was one of the reasons. It was too early. Yeah? The mobile networks were not developed. The internet infrastructure was not there. So it didn't work out, even though the concept was there. Nokia was there already, and 15 years ago, as we all know, they disappeared. Nokia had their strongest sales and profit in the year the iPhone was launched. Yeah? Nobody thought anybody could challenge them in 2007. And now, I mean, 4 years later, they were gone. Big corporation. This demonstrates the urgency. It is about optimized capacity utilization because you need the flexibility in Industry 4.0. Yeah? You need to flexibly shift around. And this is not only about information technology. It's not only about software. It is also about hardware. And this is tricky sometimes. It's hard. You need roads. You need really also the equipment that is flexible enough to do all this. And this is where what is different basically from the consumer internet and communications internet when it comes to Industry 4.0. It's about a combination of hardware and software, which has a much higher complexity. Yeah? And then it's about, I would call it value chain permeability. So the components need to be able to talk to each other. Because what you have today is you have basically communication protocols, communication standards, which are set up by each component manufacturer, each machine tool manufacturer. The large ones, they set up, they define their own languages. Yeah? And so you would have exactly the key problem that those machines and components and elements, they can't talk to each other. It's just like, if we were here in a room with an audience with 5 or 10 people from China, and we don't have the translators here, if they can't talk to us. So we need standards. Yeah? Standardization bodies. This has been a key topic in Industry 4.0 for at least the last since its inception, 10 years probably. OPC QA are topics here for more tech savvy people. And lastly, it's also about data security and privacy. Because, as we all know, those IT systems, and with them also the physical assets, are very vulnerable to attacks from the outside. And this is probably not so, let's say, critical if somebody gets the telephone numbers or my contact data from and hacks my phone. This is one thing. But if you imagine a nuclear power plant, or if you imagine any your plants, when they are hacked, this can mean a disaster, a real disaster. And this is a problem. In this area, we will certainly see more innovation in the next years from cryptographic sealed databases from blockchain, which is the underlying technology about all these under all these cryptocurrencies that are in the media today. So we will see large applications emerge in this field on the basis of this technology. This would be my and our vision for the future here. So with this, I want to go to the second part of this intro presentation, setting the scene, and want to share with you some empirical insights from a global survey on digital transformation and Industry 4.0. Maybe for now, before I move on here, are there any questions, any comments so far you would have directly here? Maybe forgot that to mention that early on. So I'm very happy to take your questions, and you just intervene and when you want to contribute, or I should maybe explain some things in more detail. So obviously so far not the case. So I would right now share some of those empirical insights on a study on digital transformation towards Industry 4.0, where we had about 103 respondents to a fairly comprehensive survey and questionnaire, and it was a global study, cross industries, so there was automotive, energy, telco, manufacturing, consumer goods companies in there, and from this executive summary I took this chart, which shows you, gives you an overview of the structure. It was first about drivers and challenges of digital transformation. So here it's about the opportunities and challenges these companies see in their transformation journey, the changes the firm is facing, the changes in the competitive landscape. By the way, you will get all the material will be available to you. It's full disclosure. In the second field, here in the center, we have the areas strategy and governance, where it's about the maturity of the digital strategy, about the KPIs they had, the roles and responsibilities to drive this, then about products and services, how is this changing, what is the share of digital sales and service, what are the changes in the development process these companies are facing. Then it's about the customer management, how is the share of the digital sales and service interaction, how much is the spend in digital marketing. Then you would see here in the area D, operations and supply chain. So how mature are the digital and physical operations? What is the target picture and transformation roadmap? How far are these companies here? And how do they dynamically adapt? And then the corporate services and control, so everything we are talking about in strategy, finance, HR, and so on, support functions in a form. So what is the impact of digital on an Industry 4.0, on the transparency, on the maturity of the support processes, and lastly, also on workplace and culture. How are concepts like agile, for example, influencing the day-to-day life already of these companies? Now, the outcome of this was this. We condensed it into a so-called Digital Transformation Index. And by the way, this is taken from directly from the study, which I did a while ago with the team. What you can see here is that the majority of the companies are only digital adaptive. Yeah? So it's ranging here from on the x-axis on a scale from 0 to 10 on this index. Yeah? We have an average of around 4, 3.9. Yeah? Of those 104 companies, it's ranging from being from companies that are digital aware, that are digital adaptive, digital oriented, and also very digital centric. You see only 2, 3 data points here. And on the y-axis, you have basically the ranking. Yeah? Number 1 to number 103 down there. Yeah? Global distribution of companies, big ones or medium-sized in most cases, yeah? Which gives you a good indication of where they stand. And even though the data is 2 years, probably it has been updated in some cases, the picture, I'm sure, didn't change significantly so far. So if we look deeper here, you can see all those 103 companies here on the y-axis, yeah, without the names, obviously. And the digital centric is only, you would consider here. Yeah. The index, obviously, is always, let's say, a critical thing. It's math behind it. Yeah? But I'm pretty sure that it's quite representative. And if we look at this chart, you can see the areas I just explained: strategy and governance, products and services, customer management, operation supply, and so on. Where is the cross-industry average on a scale from 0 to 10, yeah, in strategy and governance? In blue, that's the average of performance, basically, of these surveyed companies. And in gray, that's the star, basically. So we had some companies that were really exceptional, very strong in digital and Industry 4.0, in a wider sense, Industry 4.0, in strategy and governance. And but the average is maybe around 4 here. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. In products and services, they are in general an average not strong. So what is at the core of Industry 4.0, the global industrial landscape across all industry verticals is not strong. So I would say it's from the Turkish perspective, there's still a lot of room to claim your space, more or less, because the others are not, let's say, light years away. Then customer management also, on average, not very strong. Operations and supply chain, the second key area of Industry 4.0, very weak on a global scale. Very weak. There are obviously some companies who are fairly advanced, but there was not one company where we would say they are really super. Yeah. In corporate service.
What industry was that company operating in?
This was not the best one.
What industry is that company operating in that you gave an example?
The industries are basically, I mentioned it here. Hopla. Yeah, you can see it here. We clustered it through automotive industry, telecom media industry, energy and utilities, financials, consumer life science, engineering and manufacturing, travel and transport. Yeah. So, yeah.
I just want to ask you which one is excelling at operations and supply chain.
I can't, unfortunately, I can't. Maybe we have a chat later, but it's also not.
I don't want the name of the company, but the industry.
Yeah.
What industry?
This is more. I mean, the purpose of this. The purpose of this service is always that they only disclose the information if we don't tell them. And I have to be honest. Yeah. I have the Excel list somewhere where there's also the specific company mentioned, yeah, and also know some companies where I would go to when I want to really know where they are advanced. We can have a discussion on that certainly later, but it is, yeah, it won't be that surprising, yeah. In some cases, I mean, you would certainly find the Bosch of the world who have very advanced plans, for example, but the key question is, for example, does that fit exactly to your requirements? And there are sometimes also very small firms which are very, very innovative, very creative in adapting in this area because they can move fast. Yeah? So I think the real challenge is really to identify the medium-sized who are very creative in this case, yeah. But yeah, the interesting thing about this is where have I been? Yeah, when you look at the different industries in this survey, and this was really surprising. Automotive industry turned out to be, all those representatives who took part turned to be very strong. Yeah, although from my knowledge, I mean, I know Audi, I know Daimler, I know BMW and Volkswagen, these big players. They are actually compared to the telecommunications and media industry, which I also know very well. Yeah, yeah, really behind. Yeah, from the whole yeah, approach, culture. It's I wouldn't say not leading edge in most places. There are some exceptions, some departments, and it's also wouldn't be fair to say to generalize, yeah, because these are huge corporations, and in huge corporations you have a lot of diversity as well. Yeah, but really what's surprising for me was that all the participants from the automotive industry turned out to be very strong. Yeah, whereas, for example. And then the profile is also interesting. Yeah? I can go into some more detail here with some other charts. Whereas, for example, the telco and media industry was not so strong here. If you
Oliver, what I find very surprising is that operations and supply chain is actually very low.
Yeah.
Which I'm surprised because I think that the factories are pretty automized.
Yeah.
And what I'm very much surprised is that workplace and culture has higher scores than operations and supply chain. And when I at least look to my clients, yeah. I would say it's actually vice versa. I mean, I would say workplace and culture. Yeah. I think, particularly in Europe, we still have a very conventional, conservative way of, working together. So my gut feeling would be they are completely overestimating themselves in terms of workplace and culture. I think it is, you know, Silicon Valley is a completely different world.
But we had this is a global survey, so we had also companies from the US, Asia, and not only Europe, in there. And it's certainly also a spotlight. It's not 10,000 companies, it was 100, and there was also, let's say, a follow-up interviews to come to your question, Bülent. So we had this study basically took 1 year to collect the data and evaluate it with a larger team and many interviews behind it. So it was not just a survey and people tick boxes and so. But to come to your question, yes. Automation of processes is and operations in the factory is certainly fairly advanced in many industries, whereas cultural aspects, let's say agile project development beyond information technology, is certainly for many companies far away from realization. I would agree that on average that's true. But it was surprising for me as well. And also, if I look in many IT departments throughout these companies, and I see really many of them, and did large digital transformation and IT transformation projects as well. In mid-sized companies with 500 employees to 300,000 employees over years, I'm actually surprised that some of them are here have a rating of 10, because what I see in reality doesn't match that. Maybe Carl Michael, you want to comment on that one, because I see you.
Yes, I want to come. Can you hear me? Yeah. I want to.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, I want to, I think, comment on both. I've seen a couple of studies next to the one we conducted here on workplace and cultures, and in the end, there are two camps. There are people who say, yes, everything works fine in my company, and others say, if I compare myself with the Silicon Valley players, I'm much behind. For the first camp, I can tell you from all my experience, having built up companies myself, these guys are totally wrong. They don't even know what agile means. They don't even know what customer-centric means. They have absolutely no clue what's really going on out there. So whatever you get here, you have to see it as, to a certain degree, a biased view of people, and I think what we will do in the next breakout session, we do the same exercise with you. It's better to be honest in these respects than to say, yes, everything will work fine, because in the operation and supply chain part, yes, you can buy equipment, right? You can buy technology, right? And if you are financially strong, right, no problem to do this. But to get the cultural, the operational aspect right is the biggest challenge in digital transformation all around the world. For anybody who has worked in a corporate environment and has at the same time worked, let's say, in a startup or digital environment, at the first thing they say, the one thing which is different, we all use cloud technologies, blah, blah, blah. It's the way we are working. So not to underestimate. So I tend to be on your side, Bülent, with this. I think this is maybe a little bit biased to the top.
Well, but I'm not saying we had here players. I would have to look them up who were, let's say, digital players that have a fairly advanced culture. Maybe there was we would have to look at the split basically of the companies, which influences the average. But as I said, it's just let's say a crystallization point for an interesting discussion. To add to your point, Carmichael. Yeah, you wanted to?
Let's say almost similar is that I always skeptical about that this as a survey because of that digital knowledge of the people. Is that people, let's say, they learn more digital and then they become that evaluate is less. Is that so? Is the like is that we had a similar survey with the Boston Consulting in Turkey, 600 companies. Is that Turkish company feel very safe on digital cyber securities? Is they believe that their firewalls, that everything is that to protect their manufacturing systems, but already they are all PLCs. There are a lot of open ports, and they don't know is that they have the open ports there. So one of the thing is the second one is that always two dimensions. Is that one of the there are the companies is that like is that the traditional and the classic companies trying to be digitalized, and there are also the companies is that established based on digital services or digital products. So if you put on that the same pot, is that they become mixed.
Yeah.
When, like is that, for example, digital-centric companies, we have, as a, let's say, friends from, as a owner of venture capital from Far East, is that 8 years ago, it came and tried to explain us is internet-centric companies. Mm-hmm. Is that how that, let's say, because he also consulting Alibaba, telling that how that the company organization is that, let's say, the shuffle, putting the internet on the center, we used to put the customer or processes, is that, so it's fully changed. So supposed to be there is no, let's say, the company already in Turkey, for example, changed their organization based on internet, still based on processes. So that's why that three level of the companies is that that's why putting on same pot.
Yeah, well, I fully agree that, and that's why we also have, let's say, a subdivision in industries basically here, cut through this. Yeah, and I have. Yeah, some more details, and there's always what you can show basically what happens in when you present data. Yeah, is always a discussion emerges whether we can trust it, and that's good. It's good because people start to think and to challenge what they see and to basically put their experience into perspective. Yeah. And this is exactly what we have to change, what we want to reach, because that's the first step to actually make things happen and to bring things forward. Yeah. That's why I think it will be also very useful in our next exercise after the break, basically to dive deeper and have this discussion among us. Where we stand in certain selected dimensions here, and then look a bit at further results here. To show you here again the study results, really astonishing. Automotive was here top on average with this average score, telecom and media second. Yeah. Yeah, the key insights were that on average most companies were only in the digital adaptive area, even after 20 years of digital transformation, I would say. Yeah, and industry, 10 years industry 4.0, which is a bit more factory focused. Yeah. They basically, and I will show this as well, across all the industries, we have an extreme spread. We have laggards, companies which are really far behind, and companies which are quite advanced. Yeah. This is also a very strong indication here. So we had only very few digital leaders. Yeah. If you look at the industry section here, for automotive, you see these are in red, the automotive companies, 2, 4, 5. Yeah. They are quite advanced here, and there were some outstanding. Yeah. Because they use a lot, or in many dimensions basically, they at least convinced us and were also very good, let's say, to show examples how they perform. Yeah? But the problem with those surveys, and I admit that, I fully admit that, is that when you talk, for example, to Audi or Daimler or so, you only talk to a few people. Yeah, but it's 250, 300,000 people. Volkswagen, 600,000 people. Yeah, so it's always very difficult, let's say, to get an accurate picture of a complete company here. Yeah, you always have spotlights on certain aspects. Yeah? But it inspires a discussion. This was the automotive industry because I think we have some attendance here from automotive. In automotive, workplace and culture was fairly advanced here. From my experience, this also I would challenge this. Yeah, very much would challenge this, especially in automotive industry. Recently, at the Digital Leaders Summit of SAP in Paris in last autumn, I met from a world-leading automotive company, senior vice president, research and development, and she's not even on social media. Even her CEO is on social media, but she's not. And I heard from the transport industry, also a board member, who said, okay, social media is, my people have to do it, not me. And this is a culture problem, I think. When you're not, doesn't use a smartphone, for example. As a board member.
I have a CFO that doesn't use Excel.
Yeah.
Or they say that some cybersecurity people is that it's already prohibited to be presented in the social media. The cybersecurity people, chief operating officers, is that, for example, especially money transition or others, it's already company rules that prohibited to be present on the social media.
This can be a case, yes, but still then the question is, how do I keep, let's say, on track with the latest developments?
But there is a strong correlation, this is empirically, between I mean, we have all the Silicon Valley players. Let's take them aside. But look at traditional companies or who have a traditional origin. If you look at their C-levels or C-suites or CEOs, the ones who are on LinkedIn or any of these channels where the CEO is actively engaged there, their level of innovation, their level of cultural change, their level of technology adoption is much, much, much higher. You can say, you can see it from any side. It's a statistical correlation, or isn't it? But it's definitely there. And what you say about IT security, yes. But think about workplace and culture. One of the key things in there is that you are flexible, right? All your staff has mobile devices, they can work from anywhere, right? If you talk to IT people 5 years ago, then exactly the security element would kick in and they would say, bring your own device, never ever I do it. Simply, the young digital natives came into the company and said, I want this, otherwise I don't work for you, right? So it completely turned around. This is why I think we have to get a little bit rid of our very narrow thinking and always try to be super risk averse. Yes, there is a risk, and what these people say is right. The risk is there, it's not wrong. But if you want to move fast, if you want to move like an internet player, no way to keep keep sticking in this in this mindset, right?
Yeah, and I agree when it comes to security. I mentioned that earlier on when you're operating, for example.
Excuse for her, so this is without being on a network, is the science network, technology network. How can you develop
exactly. Yeah. But and it's a difference, as I mentioned earlier on, when you are head of operations in a nuclear power plant, or when I use here my mobile phone, I have a different perspective on security and all these issues. How open am I on the internet? It's definitely the case. Yeah. Yeah, and still, and this was really an an aha moment, I would say, in last year in autumn in Paris, when I met this senior vice president, who's a very nice person and also very knowledgeable about technology. Yeah, and also I can feel it, the way, for example, we work in our day-to-day lives. I mean, we used to work for 10, 15, 20 years only with office products, doing charts. Today we develop, for example, presentations with collaborative tools. Yeah, I can mention it. Google Docs, for example. We work on the same document basically over the internet, and it's not about producing the final slide where everything is perfect. Yeah, it's more about moving fast, getting things done, getting thoughts across. Yeah, and these are critical aspects which we will discuss as well. And it's still very important to understand the technology as well. I will focus on that later this afternoon, and to be able to assess which of those technology options we have out there are actually useful for us, for our company. So you still have to have a very deep understanding and knowledge about the capabilities of particular sensors, of particular hardware components, and so on and so forth, of particular software, about the specific capabilities. You still need to be able to assess this, and to match it to your requirements. This is a two-way process here. Yeah, but maybe let's go a little bit further into the next. Telecom, we don't have it here, but the interesting thing here is that also in the telecom and media space, and this was probably more the traditional media, you had some laggards here. And I also spoke to some media players who basically did not yet understand that the days of the connection of content to a physical bearer token basically is over. Yeah. But then energy and utilities, I think we have one representative. There was actually a number one here. Very advanced company. And this can be influenced by the person also who develops this and or who took part in the survey, because sometimes you have very charismatic persons who can convey a message very convincingly and also demonstrate very good, outstanding examples for the various aspects. Yeah? On average, energy and utilities quite also not so good in operations and supply chain, a very asset-heavy industry. Changes are slow. I mean, you are talking about hundreds of millions or billions of investments there. Equipment stays in operation for decades. Yeah, this is a different thing. It's not an internet business here. Consumer and life science industry, you can see some fairly advanced companies in red, some laggards here. When we look at the profile, actually operations and supply chain on average very weak, very weak. And this is again due to in many fields, for example, for large food producers, they have usually equipment for decades, 3-4 decades. I talked to Nestle, for example, 4 decades. They operate their equipment. Yeah, they have to retrofit their machines. They have to place sensors on top and still use the old machinery and let's say upgrade it to be able to move towards Industry 4.0. It's a huge challenge in such a brownfield environment, because everybody could go there, and when you have enough money, yeah, you have a few billions, and then you say, okay, we get rid of all the old world, yeah, and we start from scratch. Yeah? We think new and say, what if we could reinvent our company and all the infrastructure? Yeah? We just start new. Yeah? If you have enough money, it's might be possible to do so, but there are constraints. Now, financial services, we don't want to deep dive here. I think that's not our key topic. We have here manufacturing, engineering, which was not as strong as, clearly not as strong as the automotive industry, and this has also to do with the ability, with the size of those companies, because traditionally, for example, automotive players really have a strong R&D focus, a strong tech focus. They are actually leaders. They shape also the future in their industries. They shape the future in the development of machines, of standards for information technology and communication. This is not so much the case for the more mid-sized manufacturing sector. Here again, if you see in the manufacturing, you don't see real leaders. So I would say the tendency, yeah, when you also compare these different industries, the tendency, I would still agree, yeah, and it reflects my perception, although I would say in every industry you can find leaders. Every industry you can find leaders. So, travel and transport, I think we don't have this here. So what are the key messages from this intro and overview? It's basically digitization is an imperative, a strategic imperative. There's no way you can avoid it. Yeah? The move towards Industry 4.0 has to be done. Yeah? Otherwise, you will be out of business. But it's certainly not a goal in itself. It is about building capabilities that contribute to our business objectives. So it's a two-way street. It's not about a typical German approach is always, yeah, engineering, we are fascinated about technological capabilities and add the newest feature and so that's what Germans are known for. And for many also in the traditional manufacturing sector, this led to huge problems. Yeah? Many mid-sized, medium-sized machine tool companies basically were taken over by Chinese companies and others who better understood the market, simply. The technology was good, but the market side was not very well understood. Then third message is that digital transformation entails, and towards Industry 4.0 entails challenges for all parts of the company. And one of the biggest and key, and I think this has been said now twice, 3 times already, is in the cultural change here. The fourth message is every company needs to develop their own transformation approach towards Industry 4.0. And you have to be aware of your own capabilities. Yeah? You have to develop a realistic understanding where you stand, what are the opportunities out there, and what's your target picture, and what's realistically feasible. And I think this brings me actually nicely to our next topic after the break, where we can have some discussions here outside. I think we'll have a coffee. But after the break in 30 minutes or so, we will meet for our first breakout session, which is about a self-assessment, highlighting where we work in groups to discuss some of these survey questions for you and then put it into perspective in more detail later. Thank you very much so far for your time. And I think what we will do is now, as I understand it, we have the breakout session in the Hotel Rixos next door.
Yes.
Yeah?
In terms of the logistics, the breakout session and the coffee break will take place at Rixos, just across the road. So we will be going there together and we'll have coffee and the breakout session there.
Thank you very much. So we go there.